4:22 a.m. The South China Sea, 137 nautical miles east of the Paracel Islands. The ocean here is 4,000 meters deep, and at this hour it is the color of polished obsidian. A warm, humid air mass sits over the water, temperature 81 degrees Fahrenheit, sea state 2, a light swell from the northeast. The USS Ronald Reagan, CVN-76, a Nimitz-class nuclear-powered aircraft carrier, holds a steady course at 17 knots, her 4 propellers churning a phosphorescent wake into the black water behind her. She is the centerpiece of Carrier Strike Group 5, the only permanently forward-deployed American carrier strike group in the world, home-ported in Yokosuka, Japan, conducting freedom of navigation operations in the South China Sea. Surrounding the Reagan in layered defensive formation, the Ticonderoga-class cruiser USS Chancellorsville, the R. Lee Burke-class destroyers USS Barry, USS Mustin, and USS Rafael Peralta, and 2 Los Angeles-class attack submarines running silent 260 feet beneath the formation. Together, they form one of the most sophisticated integrated air and missile defense networks ever assembled. A floating fortress whose defensive reach extends 500 nautical miles in every direction and whose offensive capacity can reach across the length of the Asian continent. The People's Liberation Army had been watching. For months. Surveillance satellites on predictable orbital tracks, PLA, Navy intelligence collection ships shadowing the Reagan strike group at 12 to 15 nautical miles, cataloging radar frequencies, recording communication patterns, mapping formation geometry. PLA, Air Force maritime patrol aircraft circling the outer edge of the group's radar envelope daily, probing for gaps, measuring response times. They were building a targeting solution. A kill chain. The kill chain was called DF-21D, Carrier Killer. The Dongfeng 21D is a medium-range ballistic missile. Range: approximately 1,500 kilometers. Terminal velocity: Mach 10 to Mach 12 during the re-entry phase, approaching its target nearly vertically after a suborbital arc to 1,000 kilometers altitude. Warhead: a maneuvering re-entry vehicle, or MARV, equipped with an active radar seeker capable of terminal guidance corrections during descent. Intended target: aircraft carriers. Intended effect: the permanent removal of American carrier aviation from the Pacific theater. The DF-21D was the PLA's strategic answer to the question that had haunted Chinese military planners since the Third Taiwan Strait Crisis of 1996. How do you stop an American aircraft carrier? At 4:22 a.m., they believed they finally had the answer. They made 6 catastrophic mistakes. In the Combat Direction Center of the USS Ronald Reagan, the watch team operates at heightened readiness. The ship's AN/SPY-1B radar sweeps the airspace within 400 nautical miles continuously. The tactical action officer sits at the center console, reviewing the track log. He is 37 years old and has spent 14 years preparing for the specific event that is about to happen. At 4:22 a.m. and 11 seconds, the picture changes. Not one contact. Not a formation. A wall of symbols appearing simultaneously across the upper hemisphere of the radar display. High-altitude ballistic tracks, already above 100 kilometers, already past apogee, already beginning the re-entry arc that will bring their terminal phase directly onto the strike group. The Aegis software classifies the tracks in 4.8 seconds. Ballistic missile. Ballistic missile. 8 of them. 8 DF-21D re-entry vehicles. 8 maneuvering warheads descending from suborbital altitude at Mach 10. Time to impact, 6 minutes, 40 seconds. The radar supervisor's voice is the voice of a man who has trained for this exact moment for 11 years. Tau, radar. 8 high-altitude ballistic tracks inbound, classified DF-21D ETA 640. Tracks are maneuvering. Recommend immediate TBMD engagement. General quarters. All hands to battle stations. This is not a drill. The alarm rolls through the Reagan and every ship in the strike group simultaneously. The Link 16 data network has already pushed the threat picture to every Aegis system in the formation before the TAO finished speaking. On USS Chancellorsville, the cruiser's SPY-1A confirms the tracks in the same second. On USS Barry and USS Muston, the destroyer's systems are already computing fire control solutions. The formation responds as a single organism, a networked combat system distributed across 6 hulls, coordinated by the Cooperative Engagement Capability Network that fuses every sensor and every weapon into one unified defensive architecture. The PLA had conceived this operation in 3 phases. Phase 1. The DF-21D strike to disable or destroy the carrier. Phase 2. A coordinated anti-ship cruise missile salvo from PLA Navy. Type 052D destroyers positioned beyond the horizon. Phase 3. PLA Air Force J. 16 strike aircraft delivering the final blow against a degraded strike group. It was sophisticated. It was built on 6 catastrophic mistakes. The first mistake, they did not know the USS Lake Erie, CG-70, a Ticonderoga-class cruiser, had been positioned 200 miles ahead of the Reagan strike group, specifically for theater ballistic missile defense. The Lake Erie carried the Aegis BMD 5.1 baseline, the most advanced ballistic missile defense configuration in the fleet, armed with RIM-161 Standard Missile 3 Block II, interceptors designed to intercept ballistic missiles in the mid-course phase at altitudes of up to 1,000 kilometers. Lake Erie had been tracking the DF-21D launches from the moment of ignition 4 minutes ago and had already computed intercept solutions. The PLA targeting picture did not include the Lake Erie because she had been operating in MCON, emissions control, for 6 days, broadcasting no radar emissions, invisible to every Chinese intelligence collection ship and aircraft that had been building the American targeting picture. She was a ghost with 30 SM-3 Block IIA missiles in her VLS cells. The second mistake, they chose 4:22 a.m. believing crew fatigue would create reaction time delays. They did not account for the fact that the Aegis combat system's reaction time is measured in milliseconds, and that the watch team had been at heightened readiness for 96 consecutive hours, following a classified intelligence warning about elevated PLA 2nd Artillery Corps' activity at Hainan Island. The third mistake, they assumed the DF-21D's Mach 10 terminal velocity made it unstoppable. The SM-3 Block IIA is specifically designed to intercept ballistic missiles in mid-course, outside the atmosphere, before maneuvering capability becomes effective. Its kinetic kill vehicle destroys targets through hypervelocity impact at combined closing speeds exceeding Mach 15. Equivalent to being struck by a compact car traveling at 12 miles per second. The fourth mistake, they underestimated the Cooperative Engagement Capability Network. All 8 DF-21D tracks were tracked not by one Aegis ship, but by 6 simultaneously. The network had no single point of failure. Jamming one ship's radar would not degrade the track. 5 others continued feeding the fire control solution. The fifth mistake, they did not account for the AN/TPY-2, X-band radar deployed ashore in Japan, which had been tracking the DF-21D launches from liftoff and transmitted precision track data to the strike group via satellite link in the first 15 seconds of flight. Data that improved the intercept geometry and gave the Lake Erie 4 critical additional seconds of engagement window. The sixth mistake was the most fundamental. The PLA planners built their operation around the assumption that the DF-21D's capabilities exceeded American defensive capacity by a margin that made interception impossible. They had briefed their own generals on the carrier-killing capability of the DF-21D for 2 decades and had begun to believe their own assessments. They did not know that the SM-3 Block IIA had been specifically developed, tested, and deployed in response to exactly this threat, and that the Navy had pre-positioned the Lake Erie because the intelligence warning 4 days ago had been specific, credible, and acted upon. At 4:23 a.m., the USS Lake Erie fires 8 SM-3 Block IIA missiles climb from the cruiser's VLS cells in a 14-second ripple, burning solid rocket propellant until second-stage ignition tilts them toward the upper atmosphere. The SM-3 Block IIA stands 17 feet tall, weighs 2,600 pounds, and carries a kinetic kill vehicle that separates at altitude and guides itself to intercept using a long-wavelength infrared seeker. No explosive warhead. The KKV destroys ballistic missiles purely through kinetic impact, the physics of a hypervelocity collision in the vacuum of near space. The 8 SM-3s reach intercept altitude in 4 minutes and 2 seconds. They are above the atmosphere, in the cold black silence of near space, when the kinetic kill vehicles separate from their third-stage boosters and activate their long-wavelength infrared seekers. The KKVs begin refining their intercept tracks, making tiny course corrections with cold gas thrusters, closing geometry at closing speeds the human mind cannot meaningfully visualize. There is no sound. There is no atmosphere. There is only physics and mathematics, and the certainty that the kinetic energy of a 2-kilogram vehicle traveling at Mach 15 is sufficient to reduce any ballistic re-entry vehicle to a dispersed cloud of fragments, regardless of its construction or warhead protection, 4 minutes and 23 seconds after launch. First intercept at 300 kilometers altitude. Combined closing velocity, Mach 15 plus. Impact. The re-entry vehicle disintegrates into thousands of fragments spreading over hundreds of miles of ocean, individually too small and too dispersed to threaten anything below. 7 seconds later, second intercept. 12 seconds. Third. 19 seconds. Fourth. 23 seconds. Fifth. 28 seconds. Sixth. The 7th and 8th re-entry vehicles execute programmed evasion sequences, curving sideways 14 degrees, changing their descent trajectories to defeat the high-altitude intercept. The Aegis network tracks the maneuvers in real time. USS Chancellorsville, holding its own SM-3 Block IIA missiles in reserve precisely for this contingency, fires 2 interceptors at the maneuvering tracks. Both achieve kinetic kill. 8 DF-21D re-entry vehicles. 8 intercepts. All destroyed at altitude between 200 and 400 kilometers. None complete their descent. 4:29 a.m. 7 minutes since first detection. The Reagan has not changed course. She has not changed speed. Her aircraft are on the flight deck, armed and fueled. Her crew is at general quarters and no one has panicked and no one has shouted because they trained for this, and the training worked, and the ship is undamaged. And the math is now very simple. Strike Group TAO All 8 TBMD intercepts confirmed. 0 impact on formation. No casualties. Strike package ready. Requesting authorization for counter-strike. The strike group commander keys his radio. You're authorized for Hammerstrike Pacific. Execute. At 4:30 a.m., the counter-strike begins. The DF-21D launch signatures had been tracked from ignition by the AN/T PY-2 in Japan and by SBIRS, the space-based infrared system missile warning satellites that detected the rocket plumes in the first seconds of flight. The launch coordinates were known. The hardened launch facilities on Hainan Island and at the Yulin Naval Base Complex were already in the Tomahawk mission planning database. GPS coordinates surveyed to within 1 meter by decades of persistent intelligence collection. The targeting data was not approximate. It was exact. USS Chancellorsville opens 22 VLS cells. 22 Tomahawk Block 5 land attack missiles climb skyward in a 28-second ripple. Block 5 carries the Joint Multi-Effects Warhead System, penetrating warhead to feed in 2 meters of reinforced concrete, and GPS-aided navigation to a CEP of 5 meters, backed up by terrain reference navigation that cross-checks actual ground imagery against stored data at each waypoint. These missiles are not going to the right vicinity. They are going to the right room. USS Barry fires 12 Tomahawks at the Yulin Naval Base radar and command complex, whose surface search and fire control radars have been providing targeting data to the DF-21D fire control system and are currently broadcasting their own destruction as active emitters on the SLQ-32's passive electronic intercept receivers. USS Mustin fires 10 Tomahawks at the Type 055 destroyer Nanchang, the PLA Navy's Phase 2 coordination platform, precisely located by a P-8A Poseidon maritime patrol aircraft that has been orbiting at 35,000 feet for 6 hours, tracking every PLA surface contact via its AN/APY-10 radar. At 4:32 a.m., 24F/A-18E and F/A-18F. Super Hornets launch from the Reagan's flight deck in a 10-minute cycle that fills the pre-dawn sky with General Electric F414 turbofans at full afterburner. Each aircraft carries AGM-158C LRASM long-range anti-ship missiles and AIM-120DAM-RAAM. The LRASM is stealthy and autonomous, range over 200 nautical miles, 500-pound penetrating warhead, and a navigation system that uses passive infrared and radar seekers combined with GPS and preloaded target data to autonomously identify and strike specific ships, choosing its own terminal approach geometry, striking the most vulnerable section of the target based on preloaded ship class recognition data. 20 J-16 PLA Air Force strike aircraft from Lingshui Air Base, Phase 3 of the attack, are 250 miles away, approaching the Reagan Strike Group's defensive umbrella with YJ-12 supersonic anti-ship missiles. They are met by 6 F-35Cs that have been holding at combat air patrol altitude for 4 hours and a section of F/A-18Fs, all armed with AIM-120D. 2 EA-18G Growlers orbiting at the engagement zone edge are corrupting the J-16S radar picture in the frequency bands most critical to their beyond visual range missile engagement. The J-16 pilots cannot see what is killing them. The F-35Cs fire first at 140 miles. AIM-120D salvos ripple-fired at maximum range. The F/A-18Fs follow at 100 miles. 40 missiles, 20 targets. The engagement is over in 4 minutes. 14 J-16S are destroyed before a single pilot achieves targeting lock on an American aircraft. 3 turn south and run. 2 divert with damage. 1 attempts a YJ-12 shot. The missile goes ballistic immediately as the Growlers jam its data link frequency. The LRASM strike on the Nanchang executes at 5:14 a.m. The Type 055 fires HHQ-9B surface-to-air missiles at inbound LRASMs. 3 intercepts. 9 continue. The first LRASM strikes amidships at the waterline. The second strikes the forward VLS deck. The third and fourth strike the superstructure. The Nanchang, 11,000 tons, the largest surface combatant in Asia, goes dead in the water, listing 15 degrees, her forward magazine detonating in a column of fire visible 30 miles away. Her 2 Type 052D escorts take 6 LRASMs between them. 1 capsizes in 12 minutes. The second sits burning, propulsion destroyed, a total loss. The Tomahawk salvo reaches Hainan Island at 5:07 a.m. The 4 DF-21D launch facilities on the island's northern end take Block 5 penetrating warheads in timed sequence, each warhead driving through 2 meters of reinforced concrete before the delay fuse fires, directing blast energy into the enclosed space, destroying the transporter, erector launchers, fire control systems, and fuel handling equipment in a single catastrophic detonation. Secondary explosions as residual rocket propellant ignite, create smoke columns visible on the next satellite pass. The Yulin Naval Base radar and command complex takes 12 Tomahawk hits between 5:09 a.m. and 5:12 a.m. The primary surface search radar, a Type 517M system, whose frequency and pulse characteristics have been known to American Signals Intelligence for 16 years, ceases to function in the millisecond its warhead detonates. Command building, backup radar, communications antenna farm, electronic warfare facility, destroyed in a timed 3-minute 40-second sequence. By 5:15 a.m., the electronic intelligence picture shows a catastrophic reduction in PLA radar emissions across Hainan Island, from 23 active emitters before the strike to 4 residual backup systems operating intermittently. Battle damage assessment, completed at CENTCOM Pacific at 6:30 a.m., integrating Global Hawk reconnaissance imagery, P-8A post-strike radar, and signals intelligence from the AN/TPY2 network, is precise and final. All 4 DF-21D launch sites on Hainan Island, destroyed, assessed non-operational for a minimum of 12 to 18 months. Yulin Naval Base radar and command complex. Primary radar destroyed, command building destroyed, communications infrastructure destroyed, access roads cratered in 3 locations to impede reconstruction. Type 055 destroyer Nanchang. Mission killed, listing and flooding, assessed total loss. Type 052 D Escort 1, capsized and sunk. Type 052 D Escort 2, dead in the water, burning, total loss. J-16 strike package, 14 confirmed destroyed, 3 fled the engagement zone, 2 diverted with damage. PLA, electronic warfare, and data link nodes supporting the attack, 4 of 5 destroyed by harm and jamming. PLA, naval aviation and surface strike capacity in the operational area, eliminated for the foreseeable future. American losses, 0 aircraft, 0 ships damaged, 0 casualties. At 5:20 a.m., the USS Ronald Reagan secures from general quarters and transitions to modified alert status. Flight operations resume. Strike aircraft recover aboard, are rearmed, and are spotted forward for the next launch cycle within 40 minutes of landing. The ship turns into the wind and launches her next scheduled patrol cycle as if the last 58 minutes were a routine training evolution rather than the largest ballistic missile defense engagement in naval history. In the Combat Direction Center, fresh watchstanders relieve their counterparts. Fresh coffee. The SPY-1B's relentless sweep of the horizon continues without pause. A tanker on the eastern shipping lane. Philippine Coast Guard vessels near the Spratlys. A commercial airliner climbing out of Manila. All cataloged, all tracked, all known. Freedom of navigation operations continue. The PLA commanders in Beijing, absorbing a battle damage assessment that represents the catastrophic failure of their most sophisticated anti-carrier doctrine, have received a message written not in diplomatic language, but in the wreckage of 3 surface combatants, 14 fighter aircraft, and 4 ballistic missile facilities. A message that is simple and permanent and requires no translation. You do not attack a United States carrier strike group, not because attack is impossible, because survival is impossible. The Aegis network does not hesitate. The SM-3 does not miss its window. The Tomahawk does not forgive an address. And the response does not wait for morning, or for authorization chains, or for the enemy to understand what is happening. The response is already in the air before the last inbound weapon is dead. The Reagan's wake cuts white and clean through the South China Sea as the sun rises in the east, and the sky above her is empty and clear, and she sails on, undamaged, operational, and absolute.